Okay, so before we get into these topics, I would like to just quickly show you that if you are not good in drawing, that actually doesn't mean anything. You can still be great at Illustrator because there's so many technical things that if you learn and you apply, you can really quickly develop a great skill. The actual most difficult thing, if you are not good at hand drawing, is to come up with an idea. And that's what you see here on my screen. This is a concept of a character, a fisherman, which is probably, at the moment, doesn't look that great, but there is the potential for it to look great. And that's because it already has a character, a personality. It's like a caricature of a character, but once you start adding colors, which is still not the final stage, but already starts to look like, oh yeah, that's starting to look great. But the transition from here to here is actually very easy to learn. You have to know a little bit about color theory, how to combine colors together, which I will also talk about in a bit, but it's actually a very systematic thing. So the most important thing is to be able to come up with something like that. But to be honest, in the beginning, every illustrator starts with copying. Everyone who worked at Disney, I met several people, illustrators working at Disney, they all started with copying. You have to copy others to be able to learn or study. Just simply look at things, objects, and try to draw them. But once you have to get to the second stage, I said you're still not ready, there is still the detailing part, which can add, again, another whole depth to the illustration. And detailing means adding shadows and highlights. As you can see, that's what's being added here. And also the textures and little details, which makes the whole illustration more interesting to look at and engaging. And here's another quick example, just to understand what I'm talking about. When you have a simple object like this scene here that we have a couple of objects together, this already looks quite nice. It could be in a cartoon or something like that, but very important what colors being used. If I change the colors around, that could be a different style, but it doesn't look as nice. You can feel like things are out of place. And that's not because these colors are all very similar, but they are in harmony. They are selected accordingly to whatever mood needed to be achieved. But that's again still not the final illustration. This would be a basic we call flat colors or base colors. And on top of this, you would start to add the details. And now let me just zoom a little bit closer. So when I turn this on and off, you see what do I add here? I add the shadows, right? So cast shadows are very important because they define depth. That's what makes things look more three-dimensional. So without that, you don't really feel like there is dimensions or depth to the pillow, for example. But once you have the shadows, immediately makes it like an object that you would be able to pick up and hold. But shadows are not enough. You also need highlights. See the difference again when I turn on the highlights, immediately it starts to come alive. And all those little highlights here as well, all around the edges, we call rim lights, are also very effective and important to make it more tangible, the whole thing. But that's still not all, because you can also add ambient light. So once you have the shadows and highlights all in place, you can still add ambient light, which again adds a whole another dimension to the scene. And that's where the cast shadows appear. You can see all around. And then if I want to make the ambient light even more effective, I could even use a gradient in the background. Can you see? That's again another subtle difference, but adds a whole lot of dimension to the scene. So if I just quickly turn off everything, that was without any of these lights that I used, and this is with all the lights turned on and using the gradient. Okay, so once again, a very simple illustration. If I turn off all the colors, you see it's in illustration, this is actually a very standard, basic couple of objects. It's nothing complicated compared to some other illustrations that I worked on. If I just show you one, where you really have a lot going on. I mean, for presentations, you can have so much objects. This actually is around 11,000 objects. It doesn't look that complicated, but it's actually a lot of details there. It was used for a presentation. Now, if I go back to our main topics, which I mentioned, so once again, the 4 important things: pen, shapes, brushes, and appearance, I can start with the pen tool. And let me give you a very quick example of the pen tool. So I'm just going to open up this. And by the way, I just quickly show this to you. If you remember this example, I have this file with me, so whoever needs it, I can give it to you. This is a great exercise to do if you never used the pen tool before, to do these and continue them. So if you remember drawing these shapes on your own, then you are already good with the pen tool. You have a good foundation. But here's the trick that I was talking about. So the pen tool is a tricky one. It's something that's very not natural. It's not something that, like the pencil, if you use the pencil tool in Illustrator, you can draw with it quite easily. Let me just set this to a little bit more visible color like red. So when you draw with the pencil, that's quite natural, especially if you use a tablet like what I'm doing now. With this, you can draw almost like a pencil on a paper. And more importantly, if you double click on the pencil, you can set it up with these options that I have here. So you keep selected the path that you are drawing, and you also have the edit selected paths turned on. Why that's useful is because if I start drawing something, let me just show you this again. So drawing with the pencil, I can continue drawing that line, and I can even draw over sections that I had before. So you can see that that is quite natural, the way we would expect to draw. This is what we call automatic drawing tool, because it automatically places down all these anchor points. When I highlight them like this, you can see all those little anchor points. They are created automatically with the pencil. And each anchor point, wherever there are curves, you will also get these little things called handles. When I drag this out, you can see that these 2 handles really control how that anchor point is going to look like. Now, with the pen tool, you have to draw these anchor points manually. So it's not an automatic tool. You have to click, click, and that creates the anchor points. If you want to draw a curved line, you have to click and drag. And then the next line will automatically be curved as well. So you have to consider how this handle is working. If you don't want this to go into another curved section, like it would go in my case, I can just simply click on that last anchor point, and then I can continue with a straight line again. So this is quite tricky, especially, as I said, when it comes to drawing curves. But look at this. Instead of drawing curves, what you can do is draw straight lines, okay? You might say that that's very far from what we need here, okay? But I intentionally go to the points where this little flame, it could be like a logo, it needs to turn. So I just go on these main tips and turning points, and then comes the important shortcut. Hold down the Alt or Option key, and notice what happens when I do this. I'll just zoom a little bit closer so you can see it. When I hold down the Alt key and I hover over the path, that's when the cursor changes to this curvature tool, with which I can click and start dragging it out. I probably have to zoom back, otherwise it doesn't do it properly. So holding down the Alt key, I can drag it out into a curve and fit it perfectly where it needs to go. And look at that, how easy that is. So instead of really struggling following that path, I just put down those simple points in the beginning, and I almost get everything in place. I'll show you how to fix wherever it doesn't go into place. But most of them will fall nicely into place just simply by using this simple Alt click and drag. And I think I'm better off using the tablet. The mouse is not behaving correctly here. If you have a point where your handles are not in place, you just hold down the Command on Mac or Control key, and with that you can adjust the handles individually. So you can really align it again in place wherever it needs to go. Like here, I just align it like that, and immediately we have a perfect shape. Now you can imagine even that big line, big curve, I would be able to do with the same technique. But just to show you how effective this technique is, this is another quite difficult shape to draw. I will just draw one side of it, but look at this technique. I start here and hold down the Shift key. That's the only one I haven't mentioned yet. Shift will draw a straight line. And then I hold down Shift key again, click again there on the top. So we have 3 anchor points at the moment. Then I hold down the Alt key, we can start here at the bottom, start dragging that, and that already looks quite good. But if you hold down Shift as well, it makes sure that this curve is also forced to keep the handles horizontal. See, when I don't hold down the Shift, it works like that. But Alt and Shift or Option Shift together, I could do that. And then the same thing here, I can hold down Alt and Shift together, see how it changes. So Alt and Shift together, that is it. And then continuing from that point, I just click at the bottom and again Alt and Shift together, and there you go, we have half of it. So if I would do that with the pen tool without using shortcuts, I would have quite a trouble doing it as nicely as this, and especially with such less amount of anchor points. Remember, I had 1, 2, 3. That's it. 3 points having all this shape created. So learning to work with the pen tool and these few shortcuts will help you. And there's obviously lots of other methods, but I don't want to spend too much time on this. I just would like to mention also another thing which came out with Creative Cloud version of Illustrator, which I found very useful. When you select an object, you can switch to the direct selection tool. The shortcut is A. When you do that, you will get these little corner widgets. These little circles show up around each corner point, and with them, you can click and drag to change the corners. So from sharp corners, you can turn into completely rounded corners. But more importantly, you can select individual points as well. I normally do a selection like that. And then you can change just that one individual corner point. And if you double click on the corner widget, that's also useful because then you get additional options where you can actually dial in the value you wish to use. Plus you even have inverted roundness and chamfer as well, which cuts it off. And when you use round options, you even have a different rounding option called relative and absolute. And the cool thing about this is these are always going to be available. These are live changes. So whenever I come back to this object, even if I add colors on it, let's just say I use a color, or I could do changes to the stroke, whatever I do, these will always be there for me to make changes to. And remember, if you have the whole object selected, you change all the points. But if you select multiple points, only the ones you wish to change, then only those will change. See, if I select half of it, then I can change only half, but the other side stays. Okay, so that's about the pen tool in general and working with paths. But now let's switch to the next topic, and obviously I will be able to answer any questions at the end, so stay till the end and I will answer any of your questions if you have any. So drawing symmetrical shapes is another tricky thing in Illustrator, but let me give you two quick techniques to do that. First of all, again, mastering the pen tool can be very useful. You might think that this heart shape needs quite a lot of anchor points to draw. I can do it in 2 anchor points, and I'm not trying to show off, I'm just trying to tell you that if you learn how to work with it, then you can do these things. So for example here, I would start by just setting up my handle points, holding down, click and dragging the first anchor point, hold down the Alt key, you can already set up that V shape, then go just below the other anchor point, draw one side of your heart, and hold down the Alt key again, split the bottom handle, and then you click and drag on the top, and look at that, with 2 anchor points we drew the heart. And this looks quite nice as well, it's symmetrical, because I took care of making these handles symmetrical. But that's obviously something that you don't really have to learn to do, because again, this is all about using the pen tool. But what if you are not that good with the pen tool? You can still draw things perfectly symmetrical. You just have to do the following thing. This is one method that I like. But I will show you another one as well, which might be even more effective. So I will just click at the bottom point, hold down Shift key. This is crucial. You want to make sure that line is straight. And holding down the Shift key makes sure that it is. Now I'm just going to change the color again, maybe to something very different for our stroke. Maybe a bright blue will do. And I will also make sure, using the appearance panel, so we can see what I'm doing. So there's my line. And then now I do it slightly differently. I will continue this line here, and then I will just click and drag. Actually, let's just hold and click and drag out the handle like that, and come to the other side. That looks already better, like that. and then we can finish off and click and drag, and then just adjust, holding down the command key, I just adjust it slightly. Let's say that's the heart shape that we wanted. Pressing Shift X can swap quickly the stroke and fill color on a selected object. So what I started off using for the stroke now becomes the fill. And once you have one side and you make sure that the center point is completely vertical, that's when you use the reflect tool, which is O, the shortcut. You click in a center point. You can click anywhere on the symmetry line, and then you click and drag and hold down Alt and Shift, or Option Shift. And that's going to keep it completely symmetrical, and duplicate. Alt is to duplicate, Shift is to keep it symmetrical. Yeah, my heart is not as nice as what I did in the beginning with just 2 anchor points. But once you have 2 halves, it's still not joined together. So what you want to do at this point, having the 2 selected, you use the shape builder. People who uses Illustrator for a long time probably would use Pathfinder, which is great as well. But Shape Builder is even faster. There's a tool here in the toolbar. You select both sides and just draw over the 2, and then it becomes one shape. At the moment, it doesn't want to become one shape. Maybe it's because I just moved them around too much here. There you go. Now it's one shape. All right. Now, another technique would be if you want to see automatically while you are drawing the other side. So it's like a simultaneous symmetrical drawing. This is slightly more tricky. Here what you need to do first of all is to draw a straight line again. You can even use the line tool for this. You just draw a straight line, and once that line is placed down, you put it in a group. That's when you need the layers to make sure that what you are doing is going to set up correctly. So Command G or Control G is going to make a group from that line. Notice I don't even have any colors on that line. It doesn't need any colors. You will see why. Once it's in the group, that's all we needed. And then you set up an effect. Illustrator has all these effects, and they can be applied as live effects, which is amazing. Again, makes it possible to make changes to them so they are non-destructive. So I go through the effect menu, and I go under Distort and Transform, and I choose Transform. Transform is a very powerful effect. If you learn one effect in Illustrator, this should be the one, because with this you can do so many different things. What I will do here is I want to reflect the x-axis, so I want to reflect that way, and I would like to make a copy, so not just simply reflect what I'm drawing, but I want to copy it already. And then I can decide whether I want to draw on the left side or on the right side of my symmetry. I will draw on the left side, so I set up my reference point to be on the right side. That makes the center of symmetry this empty line that we created. That's all you needed to set up. So reflect X, copy 1, and set that point up there. That's all you need. Once you click OK, this effect is set up on this group. Look at this. The appearance panel tells me that the effect is here. And if I click on this, I can always make changes to it. And if I come up here, you can also see that whenever you apply an effect to an object, Illustrator will fill in the circle, meaning that it has something more than just a simple stroke and fill. So the appearance, remember, don't forget the appearance is a very important thing that we use. So once you have that ready, you go into the group itself and you start drawing. So I'm going to use the pen tool now, and what I will do is I will set it up just so we can see it into a stronger color, something like that, and I will start drawing from the bottom, and holding down Shift I can draw straight lines, just like that. Now when I go in here, I can see already that I made a mistake because I didn't lock that line there. That's also something that you should do before you do anything else. You lock that one single line that doesn't have any color at the moment. Okay, so locking it, make sure that you don't actually continue drawing that. Instead, you are drawing a separate line. And what's important is, and that's the last step, you see I started drawing, but it's not, I don't see a reflection of it on the other side. The reason for that, because this path that I'm using has to be placed within the group. So if I drag this here within the group and I zoom back, see, it's already there. So that's all I needed to do. And now if I continue drawing, so whatever I do here, I'm just going to continue using the pen tool. Whenever I place down a new section, I see it immediately on the other side. and I can come up here in the center point, and there you go. We have the symmetrical shape. Just to show you this in action, if I keep drawing the same line, you can see that it's all happening simultaneously. And that's a very effective thing. Again, if you are drawing anything that needs to be symmetrical, I'm talking about Batman logo, for example, anchors, all kinds of things, which can be extremely useful. And the good thing is, once you have a group set up like that, you only have to put your line into that group. So this group, you do it once. Once it's set up with the effect and with everything the way I've done it, so just to show you, if I delete this whole path, as long as I draw a new thing and it's placed into that group, I can draw straight away in symmetry. Okay, so that's another effective thing. Again, still using pen tool, of course, but this is something to do with symmetry, which is very important in illustration. Now, shape builder I already mentioned, and here's a good example why to use the shape builder. Once again, everything can be created from simple geometric shapes. And if you don't believe me now, you will believe me at the end of this session. But for example, here's a simple speech bubble. To draw a speech bubble, you might find it difficult, but if you just use 3 circles, select all 3, and using the shape builder, you join together the parts you wish to keep, just simply drawing over them, and then hold down the Alt or Option key and draw over the parts you don't need, you immediately have your speech bubble. That's how simple it is. I can do the Vodafone logo just as easily. If I select these 1, 2, 3, 4 circles, I can create exactly what you see on the other side. So I just hold down Alt, remove what we don't need, the excess, and then just simply draw over the remaining parts, and there you go, we have the Vodafone logo. And the same way, Batman, of course, and also you can do the Twitter logo. Look at that. Have you ever thought of that was actually created from purely circles? And that's a very common thing designers do. And the reason why circles are so effective is because they are the purest shape ever. Okay, they are like the most ideal shape in aesthetics, a perfect circle. And if your actual illustration is made of only of perfect circles, it's going to look very, I would say, balanced, harmonious. It just really works. Okay, so you can see I'm not going to do that. It would take a little bit longer to do it with the shape builder, but there's all the circles that was used for the Twitter logo, and there's so many others. The Apple logo is also only using circles, perfect circles. If you look into it, you can find the actual original sketch, which was made of only circles. So working with shapes is very important, but here's another example. One of my favorite things to just practice on is doing these Celtic crosses. They are almost like riddles for designers or illustrators, how to do them. Now, I show you very quickly how I would do it, and then you can always watch the recording back if it was too fast. So what I'm doing here is, again, just using 3 shapes. So all to get this, you need 3 shapes. And not complicated shapes. You need these very simple shapes, a circle and 2 rounded rectangles. So let me just do just that. I'm going to start drawing from the center. I have these guides here just to make sure that I draw them correctly. So holding down Alt and Shift together when you're drawing a circle, you can start from the center point and then draw it outside. And the same applies to the other tools like the rounded rectangle tool. You click in the middle. You just probably want to make sure that you deselect that shape that you already have, or maybe just remove the fill color and then you don't accidentally draw over it. So I'm just going to get rid of that so I can draw my other shape, starting again from the center point. Probably even easier if I just lock it. So starting from the center point, why is it not drawing? That's strange. Let me try draw on a separately here. Okay, was just stuck. Okay, so if I start drawing, holding down Alt again, I can draw it. And by the way, with the rounded rectangle, if you use up and down arrows, you can change how much roundness you want to use on them. These are completely rounded, but you can see holding the up and down arrows, I can change the roundness on them. I'm going to use a full roundness here, and I'm going to just place this back. Holding down space, by the way, you can move shapes around while you are drawing them. Okay, so setting that up, I should have kept it in the middle. Let me start again. So start from the middle, holding down the Alt, I can draw a perfect shape like this. And then I will use the reflect tool, click and drag, holding down Alt and Shift together, I have a duplicate quickly. It's similar to the other technique that I showed you before. So now I have all the three shapes together, and I'm going to turn off my guide. And look what I'm going to do. Instead, some people, I see this like a lot of illustrators are still falling in the same mistake. Whenever you have shapes similar to these, they would draw the circle on the perimeter, and then they would draw the one inside. And also for these rounded rectangles, they would draw two for each, so they would draw one outside and one in the middle. Instead, what you can do is just use a bigger, thicker stroke, set it up to roughly the width that you need, and this is a stroke, so you can't really work with strokes as well as with field shapes, but if you go to Object and choose Expand, you can turn your strokes into fill, and then immediately you can work with them completely in a different way. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a fill color on this, and maybe the stroke as well slightly differently. So you already see that that switch with the Expand was especially important step. But now I can just use the shape builder tool, coming back to our good old shape builder that I use with the circles as well. And I know this because I've done this several times, but all you need to do is to learn how the knot is created. And see what I'm doing here. All these different parts I'm joining together. So you can see the weight is up there. I'm going to join these lines as well together. Now I made a mistake. So you don't hold any shortcuts, you just go over these lines one by one, and then you do these lines as well. So just going over those, and there you go, there's the Celtic cross. And now comes the other tool which I love to work with, and that is the Live Paint bucket tool. It looks like a bit like a strange tool to work with in the beginning, but it's actually extremely useful, because with this, although these objects are not really separated well, I could still click on the parts which I wish to change in colors, and I could very quickly amend them, and immediately it stands out a bit more. Now let's just put another color in here, and you're probably thinking about the choice of colors that I use here. It's horrible, horrendous. But what we can do is, once you have your colors in place, you select all this, and there's another one of my favorite ones, is the recolor artwork. Once you click on that, you get a list of all the colors being used in that illustration, even the black outline, which by default stays black, but if you want to change the color on that, you have to click on that little dash, turns into an arrow, and then you click on here and you say yes. And then even that color can be changed. But instead of changing it here, I go into Edit here on the top, and then I get a color wheel. I love color wheels. Again, perfect shape, circle. And then I'm going to start changing them around one by one, see how quickly I can set them up. And if I want, I can even rely on harmony, color harmony techniques. I could choose maybe analog colors if I want to create something like that. Or I can choose triad, which is quite similar to my horrible colors in the beginning. Or I could use complementary colors. And once you choose a harmony, you can move them around all together at the same time. And that's quite nice. But you can also change back to no color harmony at all by unlocking the colors first. And then you can again change them individually. But also, if you come up with a color setup, let's just say I will do a bit more closer colors in this time. If you'd like a combination of colors and you would like to keep that but changing them all around the wheel, that's when you lock the colors together. And once they are locked, they can be moved around the wheel together. So let me just do that now. You see how quickly and easily I can change all the colors at the same time. So this is another great thing. If you're not confident with choosing colors, use the recolor artwork option. Okay, so that can teach you a lot about colors. And if you want to save a color setting, that's another favorite of mine. You click on this option here, new color group, saves the settings, and then you can come up with another setting, let's say this one. Okay, I can just click on yes. So, okay, if I need to change back to that, I just come back here, and I can always use the one that I saved. I amended the one that I wanted to save, but you can see the point that as long as you save each of the settings that you like, here, new color group, I can always switch back and forth between them very easily. Okay, now let's not waste more time on shapes. So that was our second category. Brushes is another one. So for brushes, actually, let me start with something in a brand new document. Nothing prepared, no tricks, no special tricks here. I'm just going to draw something very quickly with the pen tool. So there's a shape that I created, and I can always amend it slightly by using the handles, make it a little bit rounder there, and something like that. All right, now I use the reflect tool, do the same things I've done before, reflect it. We have two sides of that ready. And by the way, if you have two sides, you can just select the top point there and join it together with this connect selected endpoints, and that makes it into one continuous path. That's another way of doing symmetry. So once you have this, I'm going to set this up to have a nice stroke color, so I will use red in this case. And don't forget, under the stroke settings, you have dashed line, which I love to work with. Now, I like to set up dashed line to be 0. Why is that useful? Because then if you use the gap setting, so you switch to gap here, and you increase that, you can create what I call the dotted stroke. So let me just add round cap, and immediately you get a dotted line, and you can increase the gap and set it up the way you want it, and also with the weight you can increase the size of the dot or decrease it. So just playing around with settings can lead to quite nice result. And then the same setting I can use even for a circle. There you go, there's a circle. Maybe we can change one setting here to make sure it's evenly spread out. That's another smart technique. This one here, make sure that the circles are evenly spread throughout the shape that you are creating. So now that we have these two, what I will do with this is I create a brush from this. Now you might be thinking like, what is this going to be? But bear with me for one more second and you will see the effect. So if you want to turn something into a brush, easiest thing to do, select it and drag and drop it into the brushes panel. Then you can choose what type of brush you want to do. I want to do a pattern brush, my favorite one. And in the pattern brush, you can also set up the scaling of that shape. I will reduce it because I created quite a big one. Then I click OK, and look at this. Now I can even delete that. Draw a circle, okay? And if I click on that brush here in the brushes panel, look what happens. It's going to apply on this shape. If I do everything correctly, let me just try it again. Why is it not applying it? It should work on here already. Let's try it again. Maybe I reduced it too much. That's strange. For some reason, it's not allowing me to do it. Let me try it on a rectangle. That's really odd. I'll just show you the one that I saved, but it should work exactly the same way. Once you have a pattern saved, you can just apply it like that. Let me try it here and see. Yeah, there you go. So it's a little bit more sophisticated than what I did. For some reason in the other document it didn't work, but here you can see whatever object I use, whenever I draw, is going to apply exactly the same shape on it. So you can do all kinds of really interesting things with this as well, using brushes, but there's also image brushes in Illustrator which can be useful. Instead of going into that, let me just show you one other example of appearance, because we haven't really talked about appearance and how it works. Appearance is essentially styles being saved. So if I select this one, let's say, and I apply the graphic style, that's actually a combination of fills and strokes. So you get this panel called graphic styles by default, and you can find lots of different settings here that you can open up and you can try them out. Like, let's say, artistic effects. If I open that up, you can see we have all these different styles. Now these are all using combinations of the fill colors and strokes. So whenever you use one of these, you will see the combination here in the appearance panel. And that's why learning to work with the appearance panel is so important, because you can save any appearance and apply it easily by just using the same again from the graphic styles panel. And that's how professional illustrators work. They have their set of different appearances and they apply them. And just to show you another quick example here, look how quickly and effectively I can draw roads. If I just use the pencil tool here, and I have my layer selected, start drawing. Obviously, it would be quite long to set this up to make it work, so I save the appearance that we need, and there you go, there's the road, and I can even continue drawing that. Remember the pencil can change direction and go over and amend parts as well. You can even hold down the Alt key and smooth out sections while you are drawing. And this appearance is quite complex. It has around 6 strokes, as you can see, set up in a specific order, and that's how this is working. Okay, so working with appearance can make illustration much easier as long as you experience or learn how to work with the appearance panel. So last but not least, I have another like roughly 10 minutes, and I'm going to attempt a full illustration. I don't think I will be able to get to the end, but I wanted to prove to you that drawing with circles can be very effective. If you look at this illustration, you probably go, oh, so cute, but this is actually all round shapes, all perfect circles. I didn't use anything else, just the circle tool. And obviously, combine it with gradients and shape builder and the other things I showed you today, but actually nothing new. Whatever I've done today is exactly the same thing I would do here. So let me just try to quickly mock up the head. Obviously, it would take quite long to do the whole thing, but if I start with a brand new illustration, once again, let's see how I would do this. I would start with the circle, which is going to be the head. Okay, then I select the direct selection tool, select these 2 points, the left and the right points, and with that, using the arrows on the keyboard, I can shift it around slightly. So we can already get slightly different shape here, and then I can also select these handle points and I can round them out a bit more. So I started with a circle, and you can say I'm cheating, but I'm making changes to the circle because I needed a slightly different shape. But then if we look at the example we had here, we need to have also the eyes and the ears. Now the ears are quite simple, they are almost perfect circles, so I can just draw a circle up there and then I can draw another one as well quickly on top of it. Before I go any further, at this point I would already set up the colors just so we can see what is going on here. I'm going to use a gradient on the fill color, so I will use the gradient panel. All right, and while this fill color is selected, I click on that and I change it to radial gradient, and I'm going to go a little bit fast so you might find it difficult to follow. Again, it's doing quite strange things, Illustrator today. I don't know what is it doing again here. It's supposed to be a perfect circle in the middle. Let me just try to, okay, it actually has 2 gradients. How could it be? All right, don't know how that happened, but yeah, so there's our gradient. I'm going to change the color to a brighter gray, something like that, and then we can play around with the center point, maybe increase it out, something like that. See what I told you about lighting? This almost looks like 3D immediately just by applying gradient, shadows around it and highlight in the middle. I select these 2 shapes and move it behind the head, and I'm going to use the same gradient for the ear, but I'm going to go into it and change it to a darker gradient. So I will turn this one and that color also to a darker gradient, something like this. Then I can select this other shape, and using the eyedropper I can pick the same color already, and there's one of the ears already. We can distort this slightly if we want, do something with it, and then using the reflect tool we can already reflect this onto the other side. The shortcut was Alt-Shift to make sure it duplicates and keeps it straight. Let's draw quickly the patch behind the eye. Again, it can be the same shape, but now again I use the direct selection tool and I shift these points around slightly, and you can even switch to the pencil tool, and look at that. With the pencil tool I can draw over the edges slightly, and I could create a much more customized shape for the eye. Then I will draw the other circle on top of that, which is going to be the rim. So I'll just come back here. You can see we need that one there. And then we need to have another circle. Another useful shortcut, Command C, Command F, for Control C, Control F, is going to resize or copy and paste exactly in the same position. I use the eyedropper to pick the same color from the head, and then I can use again the same technique and create the iris. So for the iris, I'm going to again change my gradient, and I'm going to use from the outside a little bit darker blue. So I'm just going to switch to colors and the darker blue, and inside I will make it brighter blue like that. And let's make it a little bit cross-eyed. That always makes things more cute. So if we have it like that, and then we add the pupil, and I'm going to use again the same color, or maybe for that we can use completely black like that. And this won't be really realistic without a reflection. You always have to have a highlight, a point of the brightest detail where light gets reflected. So I'm going to add that in there, all right? That immediately makes it a little bit more lively. And then what I will do now is I select everything in the background, group them together, and I lock them. Command 2 is the shortcut for locking, meaning I can't select anything in the background now. So I select everything that's made up the eye, group it together, and again use the center point here, Alt Shift, and drag it onto the other side. Now at this point, if you feel like it's too close, you can always select the eye and use the arrows on the keyboard to move it around. Let's say move it 3 points to the left, 3 points to the right. So we are getting there. Now we need the nose. The nose is slightly more tricky, but again, I'm staying true to what I said, I'm using the circle, all right? Then I'm going to pick that same color up there. Then I use the direct selection tool and just move it down slightly. There you go, another shape created from that. Then comes the mouth. So I'm going to draw another circle, duplicate this, and holding down the Alt key, you can quickly duplicate. And then using the shape builder, holding down the Alt key or Option key, you draw over the parts you don't need, and you immediately have the shape that we wanted to create here. We can move this behind the nose, something like that. And then we just need to reflect it again. So using the same method that we did before, Alt, Shift, Reflect, and we have the mouth as well in place. And then after this, it's really all about just continuing the same methods, and every detail here, even that little detail on the top, using the same method. Just to show you very quickly, I can draw a circle once again, use the same color from here, Alt, click and drag, and then select these two, Alt, draw over, and we have one of those little fur piece that can go up. We can also delete, using the eraser tool, you can delete the parts that you don't need very quickly. So there's one, Alt click, and then rotate to duplicate, rotate again, and so on and so forth. So I think my point is proven with this, that anything can be created from simple shapes. So the whole thing that I'm trying to explain here is that you don't actually have to have freehand drawing skill in Illustrator. It's great to have it, but if you have a reference image, you probably most likely will be able to recreate it by using shapes or combinations of the tools that I showed you today. So that's really what I wanted to get to at the end. And just to show you an example, when you have a sketch that you have on paper, of course that can always help. And if you are good at hand drawing, then this is what I would recommend you to do. To get your drawing, place it into Illustrator, and then you can go over it by tracing it. What you need to do is once you place the image in, you double click on the layer and you turn on this option called template. Template will dim the image automatically, and on a separate layer on top of it you can start drawing. And once again here, just to show you, for example, drawing the arm, it would be so easy as long as you use the right tool, like the pen tool in this case. And then I can just increase the stroke size. So once that's selected, I can increase the stroke size. And here's another useful tool to learn. There's a tool called width tool, with which you can vary the size of the stroke. So you can add, again, a little bit more dynamism. Instead of just having a straight line, you can create width points on this, and immediately you get a little bit more interesting shape, right? So obviously the whole thing here would be, I would be able to draw with the same techniques. But one last thing that I also find useful when I draw, again, I could use a simple shape like the rectangle, okay? I can use these little points here in the corner points to create the curves the way I need it. So instead of drawing around it, I could always start from a simple shape and see how quickly I can adjust everything into the right size that I need without actually having to draw this with the pen tool. But this is the useful technique. If I have a shape and on top of that I need to have another shape which is closed inside it, what you can do is to use this method called draw inside. If you click to that, it will force Illustrator to draw inside the shape you currently have selected. So if I now use any tools with another color and I draw, for example, a circle, that circle will automatically be kept inside that previous shape until you go back to draw normally. So that is, again, extremely useful. For example, if you have like a ball shape, and I'm just going to use the same color from there, or maybe, let me just select this again. It's acting up again. Okay, you can imagine that drawing with the same technique, you can create so many easy techniques when you need to overlap shapes together. So I just switch back to this, remembering that the main tools that I talked about today were these four, but obviously it's a combination of these, and also it's get to know these tools and the shortcuts that comes with them. So that was really my best I could do in this short amount of time. I could spend the whole day obviously showing you techniques. I hope you found it useful. We will have a little bit time for questions, but for those who need to go to another session, thanks a lot for your attention. And I'm glad you joined me today. Thank you. So for the questions, we have probably a couple of minutes. Any questions? No? Everyone is scared to ask questions.
What would you say is the most misused tool?
Most used tool? Misused. I would say probably the pen tool, because people don't know the power of the pen tool. They probably start using it, then they start ignoring it because they can't use it properly. I think that's the main one. But even the shape builder, I don't really see people using it, and it's such an important, useful tool.
So if anyone wants to exit through the top of the screen, there's more tea and coffee in the access bar just down there.
Thank you. Thank you.